Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Call Halal, like Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rakah HaKodash, double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well, and peace and salutation unto the hopeful elect, the 1/3 of Yasha Allah, upholding the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability. Peace and salutation. This is the brother Bakwasha. And I want to do a quick deep dive into Esau, the so-called white man, and how he covets fields and takes them by violence. And I'm going to use ChatGPT to highlight the wealth that has been amassed through slavery, through land, and really how all of those things have been established by Esau, the so-called white man, through violence, through bloodshed, through tyranny. And these are judgments that are about to be bestowed against Esau, the so-called white man, for those acts aforementioned, because they are against the children of Israel. Okay, the apple of Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai's eye. And so I'm gonna start here in the book of Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, in the 12th verse, and we'll kind of move around here a little bit through the spirit. Verse 12. It says, woe to him that buildeth a town by blood. Salakia. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establish a city by iniquity. And that's talking about Esau, the so-called white man. Okay. Babylon in itself was established through bloodshed of so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay. So let's go to ChatGPT, and we're going to cover some quick highlights of how Esau has amassed this power in the earth. Now, obviously, we know Job 9:24 goes into the earth being given into the hand of the wicked and covering the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? But these are more of the behind the scenes scenarios that have happened, to where he's really created himself to be a global dominant power. But because of that, he also fulfills prophecy. Okay, because as prophecy is being fulfilled, okay, that golden cup, okay, is now going to be judged. All right. So this is from ChatGPT, and I'm gonna read this quick point. It says, land as the original capital asset. Imagine the country being with little financial capital. Esau, the so-called white man, as he came over here to conquer our brothers Gad and Reuben, okay? And then using the southern kingdom, okay, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, okay, as forced labor, okay? It says, imagine the country being with little financial capital, but gaining control over a continent, all right? And so what this goes into, and I'm going to scroll here a little bit. I basically just did some evaluation over where Esau, the so-called white man's corporate position is. And if you look at it, he's $250 trillion, okay, in the black, which is business-wise would seem great. But you would ask yourself, well, how did he get to, if he has over $175 trillion, okay, of obligations or expenses, and has $425 trillion in assets, where did these assets come from? Well, it came from land, okay, which was stolen, which is the reason why we started with Habakkuk 2:12. Woe to him, destruction to him that buildeth a town with blood. Through what? Bloodshed. So we're going to scroll down, and I just asked a couple quick scenarios. It says, theoretically, majority of the land assets America has were taken from Native Americans. True. Highlight the value of land, slaves, and land asset generation in correlation with other emerging asset markets. Clear. Says yes, the premise is broadly supported by mainstream historical scholarship with important nuance. Yes, the overwhelming majority of land that became the United States was acquired, and this is why Esau uses the English language, because it wasn't acquired, it was stolen. Okay, it says from Native American nations through a combination of treaties, many later disputed or broken, warfare, coercion, forced removals, purchases from European powers, and settlement backed by federal policies. It says nuance. Not every acre was taken in the same legal or historical manner. Some land changed hands through negotiated treaties or purchases, but many historians argue that unequal bargaining power, broken treaty obligations, and military force played a significant role in the overall transfer of land. And once again, it wasn't a transfer and it wasn't acquired. Okay, it was through bloodshed. And let's read up here a little bit too. This is Habakkuk 2:9. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetous to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. So not only did Esau, the so-called white man, take land by blood, he was covetous to take the land, okay, of America right now, to where he could actually create more power long term, which gives him more rule and authority. So he has space stations, he has his technology, okay, he has the internet, he has the satellites, okay. All of those stemmed from land and forced labor and bloodshed. Okay. And matter of fact, this is the precept I was looking for right here. This is Habakkuk 2:8. It says, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee because of men's blood. Okay. That's how Esau, the so-called white man, acquired or stole this land. But through that theft and robbery, he's amassed riches. And through those riches, he now has control over other assets, such as food, industries, jobs, labor. Okay. And so this is just to show what punishment is going to come to Esau for that bloodshed, because scripture even says it. And I'm going to bring that out real quick. This is Numbers 35 and 33. It says, so ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land. And the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So Esau, the so-called white man, is about to receive judgment of Yahweh Shemi Yahushai for the bloodshed in which he's really terrorized the whole earth with, but specifically Israelites of the Bible. Okay? Because that's how he has this land now. And from that land, he was able to build corporations, and those corporations are an extension of his oppression. Okay? And as we get into it a little bit more, that's why him staying at war, him increasing inflation, all of those are metrics of that thick clay, okay, or a batyat. All right, and let's grab that real quick. This is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that laded himself with thick clay. And when you go into that word here, thick clay,
Strong's H 5671. Have teat. Have teat.
It says heavy debts. So those heavy debts came from land bloodshed of land of Native American, so-called Native Americans. Okay, so let's scroll down here a little bit, and I want to hit one more point. Okay, because all right, let's start here. It says slavery as an economic asset. Economists distinguish between the market value of enslaved people as they were treated as property under slave laws, a morally abhorrent practice, and the economic output produced through enslaved labor. Around 1860, the estimated market value of enslaved people in the United States has been estimated by economic historians at roughly $3 billion in 1860. Making enslaved people one of the largest categories of privately held wealth in the country at the time. So without free labor, without killing, and without stealing, okay, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans' land, resources, and people, Esau, the so-called white man, doesn't amass $425 trillion in assets. Okay. Matter of fact, let's grab this. This is Ecclesiasticus of the book of Sirach, chapter 10, verse 8. It says, because of unrighteous dealings, okay, all of those covenants and treaties, okay, the unrighteous dealings are murdering, okay, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, injuries, and riches got by deceit. Okay, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So the kingdom that is currently ruling Esau, the so-called white man, part of the proof that he is the wicked is because of his unrighteous dealings, injuries, and the riches that were got by deceit. The riches that were got by deceit was through slavery, through broken contracts, and through bloodshed. Okay, and that's why the kingdom is going to be translated from one people to another. So just wanted to prove that point real quick. Okay, it says back here in Chat GPT, around 1860, the estimated market value of enslaved people in the United States has been estimated by economic historians at roughly $3 billion in 1860 dollars, making enslaved people one of the largest categories of privately held wealth in the country at that time. Adjusted to today's dollars using different methods, this represents hundreds of billions to several trillions of dollars in economic value, depending on the adjustment approach. Slavery also contributed substantially to industries such as cotton, tobacco, sugar, rice. These industries generated exports that finance banks, shipping, insurance, and manufacturing, though they were only one part of a broader and evolving U.S. economy. Okay, and so you can see how land creates agriculture, exports, banks are created, railroads, manufacturing, cities, stocks, technology, and all of this is wealth that's in the hands of Esau. Likewise, land creates oil, minerals, energy, factories, transportation, corporate profits, and capital markets. Okay, and so this is just an illustration. Once again, 1776, okay, till now, that quote unquote 250 years, okay, that America is celebrating has been off the backs of so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans through extortion. Okay. It says this illustrates how the composition of national wealth shifted, and that's not a shift. that was stolen over time, rather than suggesting latter wealth came from any single source. So it's a compounding of land, farm, land, railroads, etc. Okay, so let me scroll down here a little bit more and then we'll wrap up. Okay, good. It says, yep. Let's bring out a quick precept before we move on. This is John chapter 10, verse 10. It says, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's exactly what Esau, the so-called white man, has done. Being a thief, a robber, stealing, killing, and destroying that which is the possession of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. It says, I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Okay, but what's the point? The point is Esau, the so-called white man, has been a thief that hasn't been judged for stealing. Okay, this is Micah chapter 2, verse 1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. When Esau, the so-called white man, was able to murder, natives, and also possess land and resources, that was a devised iniquity. That was evil that was worked upon their beds. But then they practiced it. They had the Gatling gun. They had the gift of the sword. Okay. And that's the same power in which Esau has now, using globally to create more tyranny. Okay. Verse 2, it says, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his household. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. And so that's what you see today. You see Esau, the so-called white man, continuing to oppress, but how is he able to do that was through violence. And that bloodshed, as we had read in Numbers, Numbers 35 and 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed, but by the blood of him that shed it. That's your judgment, Esau. Okay, right along with the rest of you other heathen nations. All right. This is Obadiah, verse 5. It says, if thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? Esau, the so-called white man, has stripped so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans of everything. Okay? No grapes left. And why are these things done? To prove that he is the wicked, to prove that he is the one that is going to be judged. Okay? And this is the word for robbers.
Strong's H, 7703. Shaddad. Shaddad.
It says to deal violently with, despoil, devastate, ruin, destroy, spoil. When there's no grapes left on for anyone else to gather, that means that we've been plundered. Okay? And the way in which we've been plundered is through the acquisition of land, resources. Okay? And then there's a whole nother facet of oppression through quote unquote religion. Okay? And using Caesar Borgia as a weapon. That is how our people have been spoiled. Okay? And devastated. All right. So last little segment here, and then we'll wrap up. It says executive summary, because basically what I did was I looked at Babylon as a corporation versus how it's being portrayed as just a country, okay, or a continent. All right. It says executive summary, corporate analogy. If the U.S. were analyzed as a corporation, original capital base, primarily land and natural resources, major early productive inputs, agriculture, natural resources, and before 1865, enslaved holding states, enslaved labor, which generated significant private wealth under an unjust legal system. Enslaved labor, free, which generated significant private wealth under an unjust legal system. Well, we read, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. This is the unrighteous dealings and riches got by deceit, which is the unjust legal system that's built off of debt. But that debt was acquired through bloodshed and enslavement and murdering and killing. Okay? Yet and still, people want to glorify these acts, which are 1000% unrighteous. Industrial transition, railroads, manufacturing, oil, and steel converted natural assets into industrial capital. Modern asset base, real estate, corporations, financial markets, infrastructure, and intellectual property. From this perspective, land was the foundational asset from which many later forms of wealth emerged. Land, but also enslaved free labor. Okay, and that's why scripture says, and I'm kind of jumping the gun here a little bit through the spirit, but he had swallowed down riches, okay, and he's gonna vomit them up again. This is Job 20 and 18. That which he labored for shall he restore, and shall not swallow it down. According to his substance shall the restitution be, and he shall not rejoice in that. And he shall not rejoice therein. Because he hath oppressed and hath forsaken the poor, because he hath violently taken away an house which he builded not. You see, the scriptures clearly identify who the wicked is and the attributes and characteristics and behavior in which that nation of people will be doing when Yahushua returns to fulfill prophecy. Verse 20. Surely he shall not feel quietness in his belly. He shall not save of that which he desired. Because his whole inward thought is that he's going to rule forever. That this land is going to continue. That he's going to build his space stations. He'll be living in the space station, just like the movie Elysium. And all the rest of the grunts will live here on the earth. Okay. Verse 22. Job 20 and 22. In the fullness of his sufficiency, okay, he's acquired the land, he's set up these corporations. All of these are extensions of modern day slavery, okay, which is employment, okay, which is complete opposite of land ownership, okay, of being sovereign. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. Every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. And that's what's happening now. People are now finding out that Esau, the so-called white man, okay, has stolen okay, land, people, places. And now every hand of the wicked that we're going into Imal, okay, it says laborers or sufferers, okay, people that are actually working, okay, because Esau has stolen everything and has amassed wealth, shall come upon him. It says, in the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. Every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. And there's another precept in Habakkuk, which we just read. Habakkuk 2:7. Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them, because thou hast spoiled many nations. All the remnant of the people shall spoil thee because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land of the city, and all that dwell therein. So those laborers, okay, the every hand of the wicked is coming upon him now through the prophets of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Okay, the hopeful elect that are within those laborers. Okay, because the wealth that has been amassed by Esau has been off the backs of so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay, so last point here. It says, with the initial historical factor of bloodshed of, I was continuing this. It says, from the perspective, land was a foundational asset from which many later forms of wealth emerged. It says, while slavery was an important component of the economy in certain regions and sectors before abolition, modern U.S. wealth is best understood as the cumulative result of many overlapping stages of capital formation rather than any single historical factor. So the continuation of the question in which I asked, it says, with the initial historical factor of bloodshed of Native Americans, true. And so the response was broadly, yes, with important historical and factual nuance. Many historians would agree with the following statement. The territorial expansion of what became the United States involved extensive bloodshed, warfare, forced displacement, and dispossession of Native American nations. This transfer, once again, that's not a transfer. This transfer of land became one of the foundational conditions for the country's later economic development. That statement is well supported by historical evidence. However, it's also important to recognize that some land was acquired through negotiating treaties and purchases. Many treaties were later violated or renegotiated under coercive conditions. Numerous conflicts, including wars, massacres, and forced removal, such as the Trail of Tears, resulted in significant loss of Native American life and land. Okay, so to wrap up, executive assessment. If you were evaluating the United States as a corporation from its founding to today, original strategic asset, control of vast continent rich in arable land. I don't know what that word is. Let's see what this is. Arable land that is fit, suitable, or used for growing crops by plowing and tilling. All right. Arable. Okay. If you were evaluating the United States original strategic asset, control of a vast continent rich in arable land and natural resources. Historical cost. The expansion involved substantial human cost, including the displacement and deaths of many Native Americans. See, and I haven't even added in here so-called Negroes, okay? As well as the exploitation of, here it is, man, call Allah, how about Shemel Shai? As well as the exploitation of enslaved so-called Negroes before slavery was abolished. Economic outcome: control of land and resources enable agricultural, transportation, networks, industrialization, urbanization, and eventually modern capital markets and technology sectors. In that sense, it is historically accurate to say that bloodshed and dispossession of Native American peoples were among the factors associated with the acquisition of much of the land that later became the economic foundation of the United States. It would be an oversimplification, however, to say that all American wealth was created by those events alone. Substantially, see, and this is Esau's default mechanism to keep him from being accused. Okay. So he's deflecting the reality that everything that he has been through theft and robbery. Okay. It says, oh man, I got some more. Salaki brothers. Subsequent wealth creation also depended on centuries of additional investment, immigration, innovation, legal institution, education, entrepreneurship, and technological development. See, this is Esau trying to say, well, we did something with the money. Yeah, this is what I really wanted to cover. I said, provide estimated percentages of historical tyranny of Native American land based on data presented. And so if you look at it, the method of transfer was military conquest, warfare, forced removal, coercion, treaties. Okay. And these are the percentages. Okay. 70%, 30% land. And then here I said, if tyranny equals forced against will. Under your definition, tyranny, land transferred through force, coercion, removal, threats, military action, or against the will of the people who originally held it. Then the question becomes more measurable. What percentage of present-day U.S. territory changed control through processes where Native American consent was absent, compromised, or overridden? A historical informed estimate would look like this: forced removal, military, conquest, wars, massacres, occupation, 40 to 60%. Coercive or unequal treaties signed under pressure, later violated, and after military defeat, 30 to 40%. European transferred, 5 to 15%, etc. And so this is the wrap up. Simplified estimate: if we define tyranny strictly as land acquired without genuine native consent, an analytical estimate could be approximately 75 to 90% of U.S. territory involves some level of forced disposition or coercive transfer. The remaining 10 to 25% would represent cases wherein native nations negotiated right? So that's the lesson in itself. I just wanted to cover some of those scenarios because all of that was done through violence. So with that being said, this is Nahum chapter 1 verse 3. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. It will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord hath his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and in the clouds of the dust of his feet. So there will not be any acquittal for Esau for any of these actions. I just wanted to show how those land, the stealing of land, the utilization of slaves, having them build up the land, has attributed to all of these corporations in which still the children of Israel found in the hand of our oppressors. And that's why this bloodshed that's coming to Babylon, aka America, is going to be for the blood in which it shed. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Yep. Psalms 50 and 18. When thou sawest a thief, then thou consentest with him and has been partakers with adulterers. Okay. Everything that Esau has done has been to destroy so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Okay. And I think this is the precept I was looking for earlier. This is Job chapter 20, verse 15. He hath swallowed down riches, and he shall vomit them up again. Yahweh shall cast them out of his belly. Because scripture says the earth was made for our sakes, man. And you damn devils, okay, have stolen everything, terrorized the whole planet, and now you're about to be judged for it. Okay. So, Lord will, this lesson was edifying for the elect. Just a couple things through the Spirit that caught my interest, and seeing how, and I'll read this last point, but seeing how land in itself, along with free labor, really created this pride in Esau that he couldn't be touched. Obviously, he was gifted the fatness of the earth, okay, and the gift of the sword, but all of those things are really just identifiers, okay, and weapons that on the scene of the crime, you follow the blood trail, okay, you follow the money, and then you find the children of Israel in Esau's possession, which the Lord is going to come back and destroy this place for. Okay. So last point, it says the key economic point: land is not just a one-time asset. It is a wealth generating platform. So taking this land wasn't just a discovery. Okay. It was a way in which money has been amassed to keep the children of Israel in oppression. And that's why there's an hopeful elect. That's why there's a remnant, okay, that are not going to be touched, that are not going to be tampered with, that will not be defiled, okay, with this system, okay, and will not bow the knee to the image of Baal. All right. So just want to cover that real quick through the Spirit. Lord will was edifying. Until the next time, Shalom.